Hi. So, um, it's interesting to me how during meditation you end up heightening your senses in some way. Colors become brighter, shapes become more defined, and just in general, sounds, smells, any of the senses seem to become clearer. And a sort of an extension of that is that you you see little, or you perceive patterns that you didn't perceive before. Uh, so, for instance, if there's like a rug on the floor and you meditate, then it's likely that you, after meditation, you will notice the patterns on the rug better than before. You will suddenly realize that you'd never actually noticed that in between the lines in the rug there were red and gold little dots. It's a slight detail of the visual pattern that you hadn't noticed. And of course, and you will notice the same with sounds and even, textures, anything. So part of the this increase in the senses has something to do with patterns and with pattern recognition. Or you could say that what we call to see more means to see more patterns. So that in a surface which before had a very low kind of resolution in like computer terms, you suddenly see more in that same image. And the thing is that then pattern recognition has to do with connections, because patterns are connections, and the fact that we use the word pattern to talk about synchronicity, for example, I think is relevant, because of course meditation or entering into states of flow goes hand in hand with feeling more connected and with synchronicity in general. I mean, at a fundamental level, meditation sort of makes you feel more connected with life, with the environment, and less sort of disconnected, less living in your own fantasy. So there's that sort of fundamental level of connection where you're connecting into the world. But there is also the specific level of connection where you're visually connecting details that you weren't connecting before, which allows you to see the pattern on the rug, or hear that bird that is always singing but you'd never actually noticed, and so on. So, yeah, it's funny because it almost seems as if awareness, which is what is mostly cultivated with meditation, it's as if awareness has something to do with patterns. That, I mean, I'm reminded of something Terence McKenna says, which I think is a quote from Alfred North Whitehead, that understanding is, like the definition is, the apperception of pattern as such. So that's all that understanding is. It's perceiving patterns, which means connection, right? It's involving yourself in a greater and greater network of connection. And the way I feel this in meditation is often that you are getting rid of disconnection. It's not so much that you're gaining more and more connection, because that makes it sound as if literally you weren't connected, and then you're sort of getting like some tentacles out of your body, and they're sort of connecting to everything around you. When you look at it that way, it seems as if you could connect to things forever, or that there is somehow greater and greater degrees of connection. But the way it feels to me is that there is a sort of connection itself is fundamental, and it's only disconnection that, so you could say, instead of having, let's say as an image for connection, you could say that you're some sort of octopus and you're connecting all of your tentacles to your environment. But I would actually use that image for disconnection. It's almost as if the tentacles are negative and you're they're disconnecting you. And by removing the disconnections, you are connected. So the connection is the base level. It's not a new state which you need to reach. In that sense, the patterns and the perception of pattern is more like the removal of the non-pattern of perception. Almost like what in Greek philosophy I think is called anamnesis, unforgetting or remembering. Like that somehow the self, since the self and the world are inherently united, the awareness of that union is there from the start, and the sort of gaining knowledge of it is simply the remembering of that. But of course it's interesting because we're talking about an ultimate state of being here. So it's not like, you're remembering past lives or something. It's not like you're saying, oh, before we were this kind of person and now we're this kind of person. And as you gain awareness, you sort of remember the kind of person you were. No, it's not exactly that, because we're talking about a sort of the state of complete union between self and environment. So this thing you're remembering has nothing to do with being a person or with being an environment or either of those things. It's the void. And there's something sort of paradoxical about remembering the void. It's more as if like the void were a fountain or something from which multiplicity is springing. And this kind of remembrance or this awareness of union, again, like in a Buddhist sense, can only happen in the here and now. It's not that you're remembering something. You're not remembering something from the past. You're remembering something from the present. So it has nothing to do with being a person. And it's interesting because then awareness itself as a faculty would seem to be inextricably linked to connections and a perception of patterns. It's as if the more patterns you see outside of you, the more you become, how to say, like one more of the elements in the collage, which is kind of what reduces the importance of ego. So if ego is the most important thing, then everything that's outside of ego is felt to be less interesting. Right? So giving importance to ego, by nature, it has a sort of balancing effect where you give a lot of importance to ego. So, like in a sort of osmosis, the environment becomes less interesting. But if the environment becomes more interesting thanks to meditation, it sort of ego deflates and becomes a part of the whole pattern of environment that you're perceiving. So I think that's also why the fact that meditation increases visual acuity and softens ego is not two different qualities of meditation. It's the same quality, it's the same process that's happening. Anyway, thanks for listening.